LUAINPRESS. Fiction. The Ignorance of Nísio. A short story by Lee Sheridan. My English teacher, Mr. Mulrooney, who you will come to regard as a reprehensible figure, is competing with a bluebottle fly for my attention, though he doesn't realise it. The fly is scaling the window nearest to his desk and is, albeit intermittently, springing off to buzz and bash against the pane a few times before stopping, just for a few seconds, until trying to escape again. While I am committed to observing the fly, I occasionally zone in and out of Mulrooney's lecture. He's talking about Bildungsroman, namely the form of the novel and how an ideal example will carefully chart the psychological and moral development of the protagonist from youth to adulthood. Pig's arse, I think, as he writes up some menial task on the board that is to be completed before the end of class. I decide to ignore his work and do him one better, to invent a new and innovative genre that completely disregards all of the tropes, themes, forms and ideas typically associated with the Bildungsroman. It would have to be done in the form of a short story. I glance at the clock and see that I have 20 minutes left. Can it be done? I could continue outside of class, but if it is to be truly innovative, then even the manner and circumstances in which it is written should actively oppose the carefully charted progression required for the composition of a Bildungsroman. And so I begin. Nísio, a gentleman of the geriatric variety, was suffering from a peculiarity. He had suddenly acquired the gait, mobility and appearance of a 300-year-old man, despite having youthful qualities mere moments before. He lay, spread-eagled on his back, and looked so old and constricted by the sudden onset of age that a distant onlooker might have thought he was a large, decaying insect husk. He certainly looked it, given his pale, emaciated body, his gaunt, sunken face, and his scraggly grey beard, which was as long and thin as his twig-like limbs. By no means was he a happy camper. To make matters worse, he could hardly see. 5 minutes ago he had stellar vision, but now he had to squint to make out what was just a few yards away from him. Standing over him was the outline of a tall, white creature. He could hear it whinny and clop its hooves against the stone floor next to his head. He tried to raise an arm in defence, but his joints were so sore and his muscles so shriveled that it was useless. "O Lord," he cried, "what have I done to deserve this? Have I not led a good and honest life? Have I not been humble in giving? Did I not sacrifice everything for those who I hold dear? Lord, if you can hear me, I beg you to spare me from this ghastly fate. Give me a chance to prove my worth, and I will show you how grateful I am." Trotting could suddenly be heard approaching from the west. With great difficulty, he turned his head and narrowed his eyes to make out who it was. It was hard to say, but he was confident, given the top-heavy shape of the impending figure, that it was in fact Hermain, his dear lover. Not that he had much faith in them anyway, but Nísio could not believe his eyes. No, really. There was something unnatural about what he was witnessing. It really was Hermain, and even more surprising was that she was on a horse. As they neared, Nísio could see that the horse's legs were trembling and slightly buckled. How could it be her? He thought. She couldn't get up out of her throne last week. Now here she was rescuing me on a horse. But there was no doubt in his mind that it was her, for he had mistaken her nasally breathing for the wind long before he had even heard the trotting. "Hermain, love," he said, "is that you?" "I told you to stay on the horse," she wheezed. "I know. It was an accident, my dear. I've a good mind to leave you there. And it is what I deserve for leaving Tir na Nog. You are the greatest thing to have ever happened to me, and I should not have forsaken you." "What caused you to fall?" she asked, dabbing her glistening forehead with a cloth. "There were men here. They were trying to move a boulder. I thought about riding on, but I wanted to help them. I reached down to lift the boulder when suddenly I heard a loud snap. Next thing you know, and I'm lying horizontal on the ground. I thought I was okay, but a strange sensation came over me. I suddenly felt weak, as though all my strength had evaporated in an instant. I looked down at my hands and I no longer recognized them. They are grey, hairy, knuckled and spotted. They are grotesque. But it didn't stop there. It spread up all along my arms, a wave of grey hairs and saggy, liver-spotted skin. Have you ever seen skin sag in a matter of seconds? It is a frightening thing, I tell you. No, I have never seen skin sag, she said. My skin is fresh and firm. Nobody ages in the land of eternal youth. Of course, he said. How stupid of me. Even if she lived in the land of mortals, it is likely that she would not age too quickly, he thought. With a gross weight of 22 stone, she was far too swole for wrinkles. He loved her, though. He felt she had more to offer him than a skinny woman. But given his twig-like condition, he didn't fancy his chances in bed with her. She said, looking around her. It is strange. I don't see any boulders, nor any men for that matter. They hardly just left you here to die. He nervously swallowed. One of his ancient legs twitched. They went to get help. Are you codding me? No, he said lamely. He might have been nearly blind, but he could feel the burning intensity of her stare. Yes, he said at last. What really happened? She asked. He looked away, shamefacedly. I thought I saw a gold coin on the ground. What was it? He shook his head. I can't say. Tell me now, or I'll leave you here to die. A bit off the inside of a potato packet, he whispered, a single tear streaming down the left side of his face. Her horse suddenly let out a pained neigh. Easy, boy, she said, bending down to rub his neck. She turned to Nísio. Do you see what you're after doing? You're upsetting Sean. He never knew she had named the horse Sean. He also doubted Sean's neigh was directed at him. His eyes darted to the poor creature's shuddering knees. Do you think it might be an idea to give the horse a break, love? Why would you think that? She snapped. No reason. I can't step down off this horse or I'll end up like an owl one. I can restore your youth, but for that to happen you must sit with me on Sean. He could not swear upon his life, but Nísio was certain that tears were streaming from Sean's eyes. Either that, or it was raining on one tiny patch of ground beneath his head. Needless to say, his legs were on the fritz, rapidly shaking from side to side as though he were performing some wild equine jig. Are you sure that will work? Nísio asked. You don't have much of a choice, she said. Either you do this, or you die. She was right. He had no other option. His heart went out to poor Sean, an animal who, it was fair to say, was getting the bad end of the stick, but at the end of the day was also a beast of burden. It was him or Sean. I trust you, Humain, he said. Take my hand. She bent down as far as she could and stretched out her hand. He tried to reach it, but his arm would not budge. I can't do it, he cried. Of course you can, love. Reach for me. He had to do this. There was no other way. He was Nísio, son of Luke MacKnife. He could do this. He called upon every muscle, every fibre, every nerve of his being, and through gritted teeth slowly raised his arm. Limply, his bony fingers brushed against her sausage-like equivalents. She huffed, heaved, and handled him by the wrist in one frightening move before lifting him like a dead ferret by the tail. He was as light as a satin scarf, but to Sean he was the final straw. His legs snapped under the added weight, splaying out in all directions and causing Humain to tumble forward onto the hard ground. She tossed Nísio into the air, and with him sharing many of the same qualities as a feather, he floated gently down onto Sean's back, where he instantly transformed into his former youthful self. I'm back, he yelled. Oh, Lord, I'm back. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will not forget this, Lord. Believe me, I will make you proud, I swear. He then turned to Humain, who was in a condition that did not warrant description. Do you know what, he thought? I gave 300 years of my life to that woman. I worked myself to the bone for her. Apart from riding out to save me, what did she ever do for me? Not much, I can tell you. She was more than happy to call me hateful names and bark orders from that throne of hers. Is that what I want to go back to? With this newfound youth? No, this is a sign. More than that, it's an opportunity. An opportunity that I will not waste. And with that, he leapt from Sean onto his old horse. Without saying a word, he began riding out eastwards, not daring to look back for fear his heart would soften. Then came her cries and sobs. "Nísio," she wept, "Nísio." "Goodbye, Hemain," he said, kicking the horse so that his trot would turn into a gallop. "I'll see you on the other side." The bell rings. Class is over. Mr. Mulrooney, with his hands behind his back, begins strolling up the centre aisle, watching as his students pack up and leave. I am scribbling down the last sentence as he approaches my desk. He notices me and hones in, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Well, this is something I don't see every lesson," he says. "Actual work being done. It's a miracle." I say nothing, just grit my teeth and pack up. "Can I read that?" he asks. He takes up the pages before I can answer. As he reads, he starts strolling back up towards his desk, where, with a frown, he sits back into his seat, his eyes fixated on my ignorant short story. I decide to remain at my desk until he is finished. I watch coldly as his pupils follow the words from one side of the page to the other. By the end, he looks perturbed, even somewhat offended. Without saying a word, he scrunches up the pages and tosses them into the bin. "I won't have that nonsense written in my class. You won't get very far writing like that when you're leaving." A reprehensible figure, I think, picking up my bag. Still, given the manner and circumstances, and how they should actively oppose the carefully charted progression often seen in the composition of a building's Roman, I find the fate of my story to be a fitting one.